Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's live, of course, always live, almost always live, edition of our midweek Maranatha Prophecy Update. I'm glad to have everyone joining along with us today, and all of our mods and everyone that's on there. And today we're going to be talking about what will come of this. We've got some interesting things here, and got on a good personal friend and friend of the program as well, John Holler. Good afternoon, my friend.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing good. How are you doing today?
I've been better, but that's a long story you don't want to hear about. So,
That is a long story. A long story. So, all right. Well, hey, we're going to get right on into it because, man, there's just so much here to talk about. In fact, let me switch screens here so I can get to where I need to be. We're just going to just get right on to it today. There's so much going on, and there's so many different perspectives on the geopolitical aspect of things. And folks, let's pay attention here because the geopolitical aspect of things, we see that throughout the Word of God. Old Testament, New Testament, geopolitics are all in it, my friends. And well, we want to have a good understanding of these things, or try to as best as we can. So I want to start right off with this one right here. This one was in the New Republic. White House says it doesn't matter, direct quote, if Russia is helping Iran in war. And let's understand that this war is their desire is to come against the United States, the great Satan, and Israel, the little Satan. What is your thought on that? White House says it doesn't matter if Russia is helping Iran with the war.
well, it's a little bit hard to understand because I don't know exactly when that was said, and these things change pretty rapidly, as you know. So that might have been something that was said 3 days ago, which in today's geopolitical context is a bit like quoting ancient history. I don't know that if you pin Trump down today, or maybe you got one of his ultimate fighting champion people to pin him down, that you would get necessarily the same answer today. And I'll be honest with you, I watch this, I read a lot, I watch videos, speeches, and things about what people are talking about. And it's hard to follow because it changes so quickly. So I don't know if Trump would say that today or not, because I do know that at the NATO meeting yesterday, Trump, and I think this was a change from his prior position, said, yeah, I think it's okay for Russia or for Ukraine to make strikes deep into Russia. I don't know that he had said that before, so I don't know that he would be so deferential to Russia at the time, like, well, Russia can supply things to Iran. I would also say the facts on the ground in the last 24 hours seem to be contrary to that. One of the things that a lot of people are talking about, and I do think this plays into Bible prophecy, are various trade corridors. If you remember, Biden went to I think it was the G20 meeting near the end of his term and talked about the IMEC corridor, India, Middle East, Mediterranean, European corridor.
It's a big deal.
Where they were going to bring trade in through the Persian Gulf, across Saudi Arabia, across Israel to the Mediterranean, then on to Greece and into Europe. It was a very big deal. In fact, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, just a couple weeks or less before October 7th, said, "Yeah, we're on board with this. This will be great. This will be earth changing." Bibi Netanyahu went to the UN on later that week, and he had charts about IMEC, and then October 7th happened, and I may have some of my timing off a little bit. So anyway, but Bibi was at the UN talking about it just a couple weeks before October 7th, 2023. Yeah, that's right. It was still in the Biden administration. Biden was still in office. So there is one of these other trade corridors that Russia, China, and Iran have tried to put in place is a railroad down to a port on the Persian Gulf called Bandar Abbas. I can't remember which side of the Straits of Hormuz it's on, but it's an important port in Iran. And there's a railroad that goes up through Iran along the Caspian Sea to Russia. And it's pretty clear that Russia has been supplying arms and other things to Iran before and during this war along that railroad. But the railroad has some key vulnerabilities, one of which are railroad bridges. And this is a flaw in all of the proposed trade corridors that we've seen, whether it's IMAC, whether it's the Iraq Development Road from the Al-Fa port up through Iraq to Syria, and across. If you can shut down a 22-mile wide ocean strait, you can certainly attack a railroad tracks or a railroad bridge. And you take out one bridge, and it takes years to rebuild that thing. So yesterday there was a very important railroad bridge that was struck in Iran near the Caspian Sea that may have severed that supply line from Russia across that railroad to Iran. That's a big deal. I mean, that's just something that's in the last 24 hours that you can find information about that at the Institute for the Study of War website, understandingwar.org.
Yeah, that's interesting. Everything with this whole thing with IMAC.
You thought that was going to be a simple answer, didn't you?
Nah. Oh, of course I did.
Wrong.
No, everything going on with IMAC, that is continuing to really to develop, and I think it's going to continue to develop that whole trade corridor. And there might be some hiccups here or there along the way, perhaps, but I do think that that's something that is very interesting for us all to keep our eyes on.
Well, and if I could just add one little bit more tidbit to that, because it's in the press today. There are sources, it was just reported in the Jerusalem Post before I sat down to do this, that Saudi Arabia is working with Turkey to replace the Israel part of IMEC with a railroad or highway through Syria to Turkey. They're trying to cut Israel out of the equation. And I think that has some Bible prophecy related things as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on, Trump had said just the other day that he's considering removing Syria from the terrorist watch list, I believe it is. And what thoughts do you have on that?
So you want the version you're actually allowed to go out over the air, right? I think this is an idiotic statement to be made by our president. Al-Jilani, Al-Shara, whatever you want to call him, is a terrorist in a suit.
Right.
And the suggestion that Syria is ready to be removed from the terror watch list, when he's sitting there with the guy at the NATO meeting, it's my view is it's highly inappropriate for an American president to do that. It's a ludicrous statement to make because we know what Al-Jilani is about. Why doesn't Trump sit there when he has the guy in front of him and ask him questions about the Druze, the Christians, and other religious minorities in Syria that are being slaughtered by his militia,
Well,
his army. Why doesn't he ask him about that? Why is that glossed over? And then Trump sort of made this offhand remark about the Golan Heights. And Al Jilani, his name means son of the Golan. So to be saying this in front of this guy in the context of the current environment, I just find it to be highly inappropriate.
well, and
I
to me,
voted for the guy. I voted for Trump, by the way.
well, of course I did
But
too, all three times. But I mean, it's okay for us to, to ask some of these things. And I mean, like a question that I have is the president says that he wants peace in the Middle East. I believe he does. I don't agree with some of the things that he's doing to try and get there, but I do believe that he wants peace. I believe that he thinks that peace is going to be in the best interest of the United States, and he's doing what he thinks, I believe, is going to be in the best interest of the United States. Whether it is or isn't is where we have some of these conversations. But when you look at Israel, and we know that Israel is the key to so many things. Obviously, from our perspective here, in the Word of God, Israel is key and involved in everything. Looking back, looking today, and looking ahead. But when you look at Israel, you look at Jerusalem, you bring it in, you look at Temple Mount specifically, and I mean, I've got Al Jelani's little croonies there, all saying that they want, and I've watched the video, I played the video clip for everyone, that they want to march on Jerusalem and they want to take Temple Mount. So I don't understand. Like, does the president not know this? Are there not advisors telling him these things? Does he not take them seriously if they are? I don't understand. Al Jilani is, like you said, a terrorist in a suit and tie. I don't get this, and I don't understand giving any form of what I would call dignity or dignifying the man by bringing him into the Oval Office like he did. I think it was the latter part of last year, if I remember right. So what's your thought?
Al Jilani is Al Shara, or as there's a Israeli commentator that I follow quite a bit. Her name is Ruth Wasserman Landy. She's usually on I-24 News, English and Hebrew, and she calls him Al Sharia, which I think is probably the best name to give the guy. I think it's a very truthful and clever observation on Ruth's part. So, yeah, they say that. Erdogan says that. I mean, we've talked about this when I was at the conference you had in March.
Right.
I think that was in March.
I
did a talk on Turkey.
Right.
And I used that poster that Erdogan yesterday, Hagia Sophia, today Umayyad, which is a mosque in Damascus, which was in the news this week because, of all people, Emmanuel Macron went to Syria on a visit before he went to the NATO meeting in Turkey, stopped at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus and signed a document. And I think that people need to understand. So Erdogan's poster, yesterday Hagia Sophia, today Umayyad, tomorrow Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa. So that's the plan. It's the plan of Al-Jilani and Al-Shara. It's the plan of Erdogan. It's the plan of many others that speak in the Middle East, although Saudi Arabia seems to be, I think, a little bit absent from that conversation right now. But they all talk about it. I mean, that's the whole reason Jerusalem Al-Aqsa flood. That's the name of the operation that the Hamas in Gaza named it. And they were going to be joined by Hezbollah in Lebanon. There were plans. They've discovered very detailed plans about how they were going to invade northern Israel, take over towns and villages, and that sort of thing. And it is in some respect almost miraculous that did not happen. Either Hezbollah got cold feet or they decided it wasn't time. Hamas maybe jumped the gun. I don't know exactly what happened. But suffice it to say, they wanted to go The plan was Hamas and Hezbollah would meet in Tel Aviv and go to Jerusalem. And that they expected by the time they met in Tel Aviv, there would be 1 million dead Israelis. That was their plan. So, I mean, I don't understand why we don't take these plans seriously. And so I am deeply troubled by the president sitting there and saying that. And I know I hear people all the time in our community, oh, you just don't understand Trump. He's playing 6D chess. And listen,
No,
I'm
I don't think so.
I'm an older guy now, officially, I think. And I've studied this for decades. So I'm not ignorant of what happens. And I'm certainly not ignorant that when Trump was saying a couple of weeks, just 2 weeks ago, he and JD Vance were running around dinging on Israel, denigrating Israel. Oh, why do you go knock down buildings in Beirut? And sort of in a very derogatory manner, I think was highly inappropriate for our president to be doing that to an ally, to someone who is a trusted ally. I just found it to be highly inappropriate and incorrect. And please, look, I respect my friends and everything, but please spare me. You don't understand 6D chess. I do understand that in the Iranian regime, um, Shia 12er apocalyptic
Right.
mindset in the mind of Erdogan, a Sunni Muslim Brotherhood supremacist, in the mind of the Qatari government, a Muslim Brotherhood supremacist financier of all these things all over the world, invasion of places. Kurt, we could just go through the list of mosques in the United States that have been built. But I just think it was highly inappropriate for the president to sit there and say that, because when you say that, the Iranians interpret it a wholly different way than what you might have meant. And you have to understand that they're going to see any concession, like, for example, well, it's okay for Russia to supply arms to Iran, as a massive victory. It will be spun and propagandized in a way that I don't know. I don't think the president thinks it through, to be honest with you.
Well,
There's
and
there's a way to fight this war. There's a way to fight the Iranians, but it's not through verbal pronouncements, and it's certainly not running down Israel.
the president of the United States, I mean, he has at his disposal vast amounts of intelligence. There's all kinds of foreign policy that in any administration gets formulated based on that intelligence, based on the direction of a president and as he leads his administration and everything. I'm just confused with where America, where this administration goes from here. I mean, you can go all the way back into Iran, back to the days of the Shah of Iran. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and I mean, the U.S. was messing with Iran behind the scenes, pretty bad. All right, and did not make friends with the Iranian people. And this was all, long before the rise of the Islamic, Iranian Revolution there under the Ayatollah Khomeini, and officially in 1979. And, so I don't know. I think that our approach, or if you want to call it his approach, even if 6D chess or whatever, I think our historical approach hasn't really panned out very well, John. And you had mentioned, which I was going to bring up, Trump there and with meeting there with the president of Turkey, suggesting that we might, provide for them F-35s, which is an interesting thought in and of itself. Now, I know that there's some that are going to say, maybe on our program here, some are going to say, and I'm interested, by the way, guys, I'm interested in your thoughts, your statements, and your questions about everything that we're talking about today. So please start filtering those in. because we might even get to those maybe even a little bit earlier and just kind of field some of those off and on. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, this is really interesting. Yes, Turkey is technically a NATO member, but we also know that Scripture says that Turkey is going to come against Israel in Ezekiel 38. So, what position, and of course, we can pontificate on this all day long, but what position will Turkey be in at that time in regard to the United States and in regard to the NATO alliance? Because they're going to be totally militarily aligned with Russia, Iran, all of these others there, Libya, Sudan, etc., coming against Israel, who is currently our ally. But we also know that no one is going to stand up for Israel at that time. So my suggestion is, or statement is, that I believe that the United States is going to continue to pull away.
Yeah, Kurt, this is kind of an interesting thing because we know sort of how Bible prophecy is going to play out in terms of alignment in Ezekiel 38 and 39 and other prophesied alignments throughout Ezekiel, Isaiah, Daniel in particular, and how these are going to work. And the interesting thing, I think I've said this before, is that Bible prophecy unfolds in a real world. It doesn't, it's at some point, it gets away from righteous speculation to actual facts on the ground. And I think we're very close to that time. And so the alignment that we see right now, my view is a little different than other people's view of Ezekiel 38, 39. My view is that the lead there, if there is a lead country, is the one that's got more places, regions identified than any other, and it's Turkey. And I think there's some ancient maps that say that Magog was in. We can have a battle of maps. I think what happened was when Ezekiel wrote. Again, this is my view. Others, I know they have different views. When Ezekiel wrote, he was looking at regions. So he saw from the region of what he knew as Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, Magog, and Persia. And so I'm not saying that Russia's not involved. I think Russia is bogged down in a war that they're not doing very well in Ukraine right now. And that could change, though. I hear Russia's planning a 1 million man call up. But I would just say, in response to that, how are they going to feed them? How are they going to transport them to the front? How are they going to train them in a short period of time? And the statistics, by the way, on how long a new recruit lasts at the Ukrainian front is not very encouraging. Ukraine this year has been taking out 2 battalions of Russians in Ukraine every day, and Russia's killing a bunch of Ukrainians. But even the pro-Russian guys that I see, and when I have enough antacid tablets at the ready to listen to them pontificate, I can't stand these guys. Even they are saying 1 million dead Russians over the last 4 years. Russia's losing more people now every month than they can recruit to put out there. Ukraine and I think the Ukraine kill rate is like 95% of the Russians killed are done by drones. And so they're being very effective, but Russia's got great missiles and that type of thing, and they're hammering back. But Crimea is going to be evacuated soon. There's no gas. There's no gas or oil in Crimea. Russia, I can show you pictures in Moscow of 10, 12-hour long gas lines last week, videos that people took. So, so I'm not saying that Russia's not involved in Ezekiel 38 and 39. There is a catch-all phrase that says, and many peoples with them. But Turkey, I think, is the lead. Persia is involved, which would be equate to the region of modern day Iran. But it's interesting that when Ezekiel wrote that, he didn't say, well, Persia will be a Shia Muslim and Turkey will be a Sunni Muslim, because it was overrun by the Turks, invaded in the 1400s and took over Istanbul from the Greeks and shoved out the Greek Orthodox and that type of thing. So I think that's what Ezekiel was. Ezekiel didn't say that's how this region would come to power in the last days, but just that it would. But I will also say there was a great deep dive by Greg Roman and others at the Middle East Forum recently about Turkey's anti-Americanism, and they analyzed the statements and direction of about 21 defense NGO and other organizations within Turkey, often funded by people from the West, that were very anti-American. But what is also true is that while Russia did, through the Wagner forces, try to exert influence in Africa, in the regions of Libya and Sudan, the country that seems to have supplanted them in that influence, which is part of their expansionist doctrine, is Turkey. They've been very active in Libya. They had the leader of the opposing factions in the Libyan civil war that's been raging since Gaddafi was killed. He had both of those guys in Ankara recently, within the last 2 months. So Turkey's being very influential throughout the Islamic regions that are identified in Ezekiel 38 and 39. I don't know if many people know that, but it's a fact. So it's very interesting how this will unfold. It'll unfold in a real world. And there may be some things that happen before Ezekiel 38 and 39 that might make people think that Ezekiel 38 and 39 has taken place. And I'm just saying is just be ready for something like that. And that could, if something like that happened, wasn't Ezekiel 38, 39, it might make the Israel people say, well, we got this covered. We beat these guys back. And there were a lot of Messianic sages, Orthodox rabbis and sages who are talking about that this is the time of Ezekiel 38 and 39. I'm not sure that it is. If it's not, though, it's sort of a whole different, I hate to use the cliche term, paradigm shift, but that might be what we're seeing happen. So,
well, I think
did I
things
even
are
answer your
certainly
question?
I think things are certainly continuing to line up for that, and I believe that Russia's situation that has been ongoing for, what is it now? I think it's 4 years, maybe 4.5
Four and a half
years.
years.
4.5 years. The whole situation with this war with Ukraine, I think, actually strengthens the position, and I do believe that Russia is not only a player but a key player, but in the whole Gog Magog Ezekiel 38. But I think there are some that may say out there, well, this whole war that she's currently involved in is just weakening her so greatly, and she's just not going to be able to really have the forces to do this in Ezekiel 38. Well, first of all, we don't know how long ahead into the future that is. I personally do not believe it's long into the future myself, but I will say that I believe that what is going on right now actually strengthens the very fact that that Russia, and by the way, Iran, will end up embarking on this. I think that Russia clearly has her issues with Israel. She is becoming closer and closer friends with Iran. Iran has been, at least up until maybe a year ago or so, I don't know how much it is right now, but Iran was supplying Russia with drones. Russia has been supplying Iran with some things here as well in its attacks. But both of them, I believe, want what Israel has. Israel has the wealth. Israel has the strategic geographical position that they're located in. And then, of course, when you've got Iran, you've got Turkey and others. There's the whole Islamic thing there, which is the deepest aspect of that. But let's also not forget that in Russia, Islam is honestly, it's throughout Russia as well, and it's a major
It's a growing,
factor there.
it's growing. It's a big deal demographically within
Yes,
Russia.
it's a major factor. So I think it's interesting, and I guess we'll all be watching as all of this unfolds for sure. So
Well, I have some, and I'll admit they're pro-Ukrainian, anti-Russian channels that I follow. The problem that I have in listening to them is that they're very fact-based and rational in the way they present things. So I think Russia has major problems. I'm not saying that Putin, who is a megalomaniac, would not try to come into a coalition against Israel. I've said this before, and people think I'm crazy, but when you look at the rhetoric coming out of Turkey, for example, Trump makes these statements, oh, Erdogan's my friend, he's a great leader, all this stuff. Almost every time every time he does that, there is a run to the microphones in Turkey to make anti-Israel statements, comparing Netanyahu to Hitler, that Netanyahu's end will be just like all other tyrants like Hitler. Erdogan saying within the last 2 weeks that the greatest genocide in human history was the one that Israel did in Gaza, and that Turkey has never engaged in a genocide, and Turkey doesn't seek to expand its borders like Israel does. But then you go to the X account of Hakan Fidan, who's the foreign minister of Turkey, and there is a picture of a map of the world. And Turkey has gone from this big to this big, where it covers all of Africa north of the equator, all of Europe, most of Asia, including Israel, is the country of Turkey. That's how he thinks. So I don't see that kind of rhetoric coming from Putin, although Erdogan says, I need to go protect our Islamic brothers, the Palestinian Arabs in Israel, and our brothers in Lebanon, and our brothers in Syria. And Iran makes similar statements. So they're all coming into this from a standpoint of they're all using the rhetoric, but it's to protect our brothers, our Islamic brothers. Now, I'll say this, I've said this before, people think I'm crazy. That's fine, go ahead, think I'm crazy. Putin, I interviewed a lady named Miri Eisen. She's a security expert in Israel about a month ago, and she's incredibly intelligent. She was a spokesperson for the government or IDF when Olmert was the prime minister. And she, as I was prepping for one of the interviews I've done with her, she made a statement in an interview was that sorry, I just had a thing pop up on my screen that, okay, at least I assume you'll tell me if my voice goes out. But she made the statement that she met all these world leaders when she was traveling around with the prime minister. And she said that the only world leader that physically intimidated her was Vladimir Putin. She said he came across like a underworld assassin.
Wow. Well, he's former head of the KGB.
Right. And he's a thug. And
Yeah,
he's
he
at some point there's some indication that Elon Musk might be richer than he is, but for a time there, he probably was the richest person in the world because he stole money from everybody. But it's interesting. He also has made this statement a couple of times. he went into Ukraine to protect ethnic Russians. That's what he said.
Right.
So here's what I do with that. I believe it when he says it. Okay, that's his rationale. And if you go to particularly northern Israel, you're going to find about 2 million Israelis in Israel are ethnic Russians
Right.
that have made Aliyah to
Right.
Israel. So is it possible that Putin might say, oh, I have to go protect our ethnic Russian people in Israel? That's a possibility.
It certainly is.
That might be one of the hooks in the jaw.
Mm-hmm.
So because everybody says, well, Erdogan calls them our brothers, and that's a hook for him, and Iran says it's a hook for them about protecting our Islamic brothers. So why do we just say, well, Putin would never do that? I don't understand. He's the one who's saying it, not me. So why I think we need to talk about that a little bit. It may be a factor. So again, I'm not saying that Russia's not involved, but I do think there are some serious logistical problems with Russia. Just here's my argument. My argument is that Russia invaded Ukraine, which is, let me see, look at the map, right next door to Ukraine. It's over 1,000 miles from southern Russia to Israel. Russia's had trouble making much headway in Ukraine over the last several years. They've lost territory, they've gained some, they've lost it. I just don't think they're managing well. But again, I think there's every reason to think they would be one of the nations, and many peoples with them, that would be involved in Ezekiel 38 and 39. But we also have to look at who's influencing the Islamists throughout Africa, Somalia, Sudan, Libya, which are the areas identified in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that come with these northern nations against Israel. And that the person who's doing that right now is Erdogan in Turkey.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. Let me see. I believe it was Asset Ministries who had put on here in 1974 that it was Turkey that was going after Cyprus. I had it here a minute ago and I lost it. Yeah, 1974, Turkey tried to take over Cyprus.
And Turkey, by the way, did take over the northern third of Cyprus about 37 years ago.
Right. I do not see any expansionist attempts from Israel. And if anyone wants to cite the southern area or southern tip of Lebanon, I think they're in error in doing so when that is utilized as a launch pad for attack on the northern end of Israel. Israel is doing what anyone would do, including the United States, if the southern tip of Canada or something, was threatening the northern United States. Make no mistake about it, we would deal with that. If it was down kind of the southwest area there with Mexico, and it was threatening the United States, we would deal with that. Any country would deal with that. But when it's Israel, everyone wants to utilize a different metric on these things. It's like Israel can't win no matter what they do. And so, but the reality is that Israel does not have expansionist goals. She just wants to dwell in safety and security and peacefully with those that are around her, all the way up to and including to her fault, because she's leaving God out of the equation. And we see that in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, with the Antichrist.
Yeah. So I just think that there are a lot of balls in the air right now, and we'll see how this stuff plays out. But I do think that let me go back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier about Macron in Syria this week, meeting with al-Shara, al-Jalani, al-Sharia, whatever you want to call him. And that meeting in part took place at the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. This is an incredibly significant meeting. Now, I have friends who think Macron might be the son of perdition, the man. I think that's kind of my view of that is I think Satan can do better than him. And he's running around with dark glasses on. So somebody said, "Is this does he have a problem with light, or is it a domestic problem?
Could,
Did his wife punch him in the face again?
could be
Because he
domestic.
wore those dark glasses all week. He wore them in Syria and everything. So he met at the Umayyad Mosque. And by the way, there were bombing attacks outside his hotel in Damascus. He left 15 minutes before these bombs went off. So clearly, I think it's may have been an assassination attempt on him.
Mm-hmm.
But he went to the Umayyad Mosque, signed some documents with al-Jilani, but understand that a supposedly Catholic, probably pretty weak Catholic he is, but from a Western, ostensibly Catholic country, going to one of the most, not a important mosque, the most important mosque in Sunni Islam to sign documents is a surrender. That is how al-Jilani sat there and viewed that what Macron does. Macron was the subservient person.
Mm-hmm.
David Wormser, who worked with Frank Gaffney's group, Center for Security Policy, was also involved in different security, Middle East related positions in, I think, maybe the Reagan and Bush administrations. I saw an interview with him. It was on about the 1-year anniversary of the fall of Damascus to the al-Jilani group, HTS, that was funded, sponsored, directed, trained, and everything by Turkey. There's no doubt about this. This was a Turkish-led, financed, supported invasion to knock out the Assad regime, to expand Turkey's borders into Syria. Turkey had been pushing this for a long time. They got it with their puppet al-Jilani. But what David Wormser's point was that the Umayyad dynasty was the largest land-governed dynasty in Islamic Caliphate history. It existed for about 100 years at its peak, but it invaded areas all the way from even east of Iran, all the way into France and across northern Africa. It was a huge dynasty. The geopolitical and religious capital of Sunni Islam during that time was Damascus, specifically the Umayyad Mosque. So understand, when Islam builds these mosques, and we can talk about massive mosques built in places like Atlanta, Maryland, Dallas, Texas, Strasbourg, France. The numbers are amazing. These are not religious political institutions. These are religious institutions. These are political statements. They're designed like fortresses. So Wormser made the point that when al-Jilani in December of 2024 led his militia down towards Damascus in 7 or 8 days. Even Putin, when he was describing what happened with the fall of Damascus, he said, he did an end of year news conference in 2024. I have the video. He said that al-Jilani's people took over Damascus, which was protected by about 40,000 Syrian army troops with 800 people. And when they did that, they got back the Umayyad Mosque. This was, according to David Wormser, a geographic, religious earthquake. Mm-hmm. Because for the first time in over 1,000 years, Sunni Islam had restored control to itself of the most important mosque in Sunni Islam, the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. And there was Erdogan signing away his well, hard to say that Macron, I'm sorry, Macron was signing away his manhood, because I think he sent that card someplace else a long time ago. But I don't have much respect for this guy. But the symbolism of what's going on is very important. And so you see this, and so now Sunni Islam views this, that when we were pure Sunnis in Islam, we had this massive empire. Now we are at a stage where we are restoring the purity of Islam, and we have the Umayyad Mosque. And this is what Erdogan has said, that poster I keep showing. Yesterday, Hagia Sophia, they turned the largest church ever built in Christianity into a mosque in 2020. Today, Umayyad, it had just happened when that poster came out. Tomorrow, Al-Aqsa. So this is the battle plan that we see coming from Turkey. And I'm sure there's a similar one from Iran. The question is, Ezekiel 38 and 39 doesn't tell us, okay, this region is really strong and this region is really strong, or these guys are just tagging along. But I do think that clearly Turkey is at the lead of this, for sure.
Well, time will certainly tell regarding all of these things. Folks, we're going to get to your questions and your statements here in just a moment, and then if we have time, we may get back to some of these other things here happening in the United States with, this Muslim socialist with ties to Al-Qaeda terrorists wins Democrat House primary in New Jersey. The Democrat Socialists of America, DSA official, says that they plan to influence the 2028 Democrat primary. That's a big surprise, right? And will be thrilled if AOC runs. That's interesting. And so, things are changing in America.
Can I add one tidbit in there?
Yes.
Recent survey among American Jews, Mamdani in New York is more popular than Bibi Netanyahu.
That is
among American Jews.
Well, and so we see the absolute, I don't even know what word to put in here, and foolishness, I guess maybe. We'll use that. The absolute foolishness. But we know that in New York, specifically in New York, that the average Jewish person there in New York is a card-carrying member of the Democrat Party. But then you go to Israel, and you see how Israel is just so distant from God. No wonder the things that are happening, and yet it's really interesting, John, because I will bless those who bless thee and curse those who curse you, and all of that. And we see throughout history that, listen, God is dealing with Israel, and the tribulation is certainly going to be a prime example of God dealing with Israel. The whole rest of the world as well is certainly affected, but dealing with Israel. And yet Scripture says, whoever touches you touches the apple of my eye. Make no mistake about it, God is going to deal with those who attempt to deal with Israel as well. And if you doubt that, folks, and if you think that, well, we're in the church age and we're in the modern age and this is since the time of Christ now, and so everything's changed, well, then how do you explain that God himself defends Israel in Ezekiel 38? No one comes to her aid, but God comes to her aid. I believe Ezekiel 38 takes place before the tribulation takes place, by the way, which also is an interesting fact because Israel is not walking with God predominantly, all right? But God is still saying, listen, whoever touches you touches the apple of my eye. I'll be with those who are with you, against those who are against you. And we've seen that historically. In fact, let's take a look at the Holocaust. It was horrible, beyond horrible, and yet they survived against all odds. Look at October 7th. We could go on and on and on. Yom Kippur War, all of these things, right? And look at how Israel has made it through, and it's because God ordained that very thing to be. So I think that many in the church today really need to wake up. Martin Luther, he got it all wrong himself regarding the Jews. He got it all wrong. And so all we have to do is look at distant history, recent history, and even to Ezekiel 38, and you don't want to be, folks, on the wrong side of this. That doesn't mean that Netanyahu makes every right decision. That doesn't mean that there is or isn't corruption in his government. That doesn't mean that there's not issues with Israel. What it means is that God is going to keep his end of the bargain, period. Period. He's going to do it. So
yeah, in sort of during this period of time, I sort of view these things that are going to be fulfilled. They're kind of increasing as we see, and eventually they'll hit a threshold where we'll say, okay, yeah, that's it. And I think one of the things too that I've thought a lot about this last week is I've been kind of sitting around thinking more than usual, but we see in 2 Thessalonians 2 about this great delusion. And sometimes we think that this great delusion just kind of pops out of nowhere. But I think it's going to be operating on many levels. I think it's already operating on many levels because I don't have any explanation for why people do the things they do right now, other than that they're involved in this end time delusion. I can't explain it. It's totally irrational.
I agree wholeheartedly on that. Okay, let's get to some questions here. Let me switch over. So we got Sincole. Sincole is saying, could President Trump put sanctions against Carney for enabling continuation of the war with Russia and Ukraine? Another $900 million just sent to Ukraine.
Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, is an interesting character. He worked with big banks in London. He's a total globalist, and he's come here now. So I'm looking at articles in the different newspapers that I read, like the Financial Times, the Times of London, New York Times, Washington Post, and to a T, and some of the foreign policy analysis magazines that I read, like Foreign Policy and Foreign Affairs, they're pointing to Carney as the guy who may save NATO from Trump. And that's kind of an interesting comment because, Canada's a big, big land country, but it's small population. Right. And I think 80% or more of the Canadians live within 100 or 200 miles of the U.S. border. So it's the population is relative. It's a huge country to the north. There's vast amounts of open space up there. But Carney, and people in Alberta, friends of mine, I've spoken there a couple times. They're not happy with Carney. They're not happy with what's going on, and he has a complete World Economic Forum globalist agenda on everything, and is anti-U.S. to a fault. So he's a big player. I can show you front pages in the big articles in Financial Times the other day about, and the Wall Street Journal, about Carney being the guy who's taking on Trump. And it's just kind of, it just seems like it's everything is warped right now. So I love Canada, beautiful country, great people, but lousy political leadership right now.
No, they have for a long time. Long time had lousy political, decades of this.
Well, they had Castro Jr. there for a while.
So,
I'm sorry, what was his name? Can't remember his name now. The guy that everybody said was fathered by Castro. Oh, Trudeau, Justin Trudeau.
Oh, Justin. Well, yeah, and then his father,
Pierre Trudeau.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's take a look at this right here. Pookie, question: why would Trump fly to Ankara, Turkey, on the new Qatari gifted Air Force One, which was effectively grounded due to reported security deficiencies shortly after its unveiling. What are your thoughts on that whole thing? I got
So
some
read
thoughts
that
there.
one again.
Okay. Why would Trump fly to Ankara, Turkey? He was just there on the new Qatari gifted Air Force One. Remember, Qatar
Oh,
had
yeah.
given that as a gift to the president. Which was effectively grounded. So what happened is Trump flew there in the new Qatar Air Force One, but he didn't fly out of there on that. He flew out of that. I don't know if you knew this or not, on the older Air
Older.
Force One, and I believe he put the I think he put the press on the on the new one. I could be wrong on that, but
Well, and they supposedly took it on a tour of bases. In the cover story is they took it on a tour of bases so the troops could see the new one.
yeah,
But I
I
think
don't think the troops care about what the new Air Force One looks like. My
I
opinion.
don't really think they did.
No,
And my understanding is, I mean, the concern is that it was given by the Qataris and it's full of listening devices and that type of thing, and maybe even booby trapped, given the way the Qataris act. So I think this is a question of very bad optics. So I've used in my talks
agreed.
about this a Qatari 747 with a Trojan horse photoshopped onto the front of it. Um, and I think this is a Trojan horse. Uh, Doing anything with the Qataris at this point is insanity. And I do believe that I'm hearing reports that people within the Secret Service and elsewhere in the United States told Trump, you can't fly on that plane back. It's not safe. It's not up to the security level that the older Air Force One is. So that's probably why he relented and flew back on the older one.
Well, and I agree with you, and it's what I've been thinking all along. I think that at least the big obvious for me has all along been the fact that it was from like I don't care if it was from I mean Canada even for that matter. I mean Air Force One should be completely from the United States of America. And when an American flag, flies in the United States of America, that flag should be made in America, not made in China or somewhere else, and then brought into America. It should be made in America. I mean, yes, of course, we understand the security things with all of that. But again, for me, the biggest thing is the optics. And when you've got Qatar, which is the biggest funder of terrorism against Israel. All right. So we know that the mechanics of the terrorism against Israel, the biggest pusher, if you would, of the mechanics of those things would be Iran. And in the training that she has done and her proxies and everything. But the funding of those things comes from Qatar. So again, I don't understand the mindset of this. And then he's flying around the plane like, I mean, to me, it just sends a message. I'm not saying that this is this way, but it sends the message that the President of the United States can be bought with a cute little sparkly toy. And I think it's a horrible optic. But I wouldn't want that plane if it came from anywhere other than the US of A. That's how I feel about that.
Right. I agree, and the optics on it are very bad. Qatar is heavily involved in this, and and we look, and so in the context of this, he flies this to Turkey. He's met with this pomp and circumstance thing by Erdogan. And as they're entering the palace, get the video as they're entering Erdogan's 990 room palace in Ankara. All along the red carpet are these people in historic Islamic warrior dress, and so Erdogan, everything is a political statement. When the prime minister of Greece came, he was met with the band playing a Ottoman Empire war song about conquest. It's just like when people went to Khomeini's funeral, every delegation was there were verses from the Quran read while they were paying their respects, and they were all designed to send a political message from the Quran about these are not trusted people, these are trusted people. The Saudis kind of got, you better be careful because you're not acting the right way. So all of this is very, very political. And so I just think the optics of using a $400 million plane from Qatar is very, very bad in the context of this war.
Yeah, it truly is. And again, all of these things where the president is embraced, it's maybe it's all his view on the art of the deal. If I take this plane from them, they're going to think, hey, they're giving it in goodwill. Maybe, maybe not, but I'm going to receive it in goodwill, and it will lower their guard so that I can negotiate with them. I mean, that's very possible that the president is thinking that way. All I've got to say is this: think that way, don't think that way. I wouldn't do it. Period. To me, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but to me, it has the appearance of being un-American to even receive something like that. I don't know. It blows my mind, but I don't think that his foreign policy approach with a number of things lately, really just over very recently, it seems like, is really going to pan out. And we know that the whole world is going to be against Israel. And I believe that, and I'm not saying that the president is intending to set things up that way. I don't believe that. But I
Well,
think,
look,
I do think, John, that the end result is this is how things are going to end up. Not that he's trying to set them up that way, but and certainly after Trump is out of office.
yeah, look, I think you're sort of seeing a battle in the administration right now for prominence. Trump seemed to give JD Vance the ability to run with this Iranian memorandum of understanding over the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump did it himself, but JD Vance appeared to be on many occasions clueless historically or geopolitically. By the way, he was my senator, and I voted for him when he was running for the Senate. The option was pretty bad. But he was acting like, well, they negotiated a settlement to the end of World War I and World War II. That's not what happened, JD. We beat the pants off of those guys, and it was an unconditional surrender.
Right.
What was being done with this memorandum of understanding was not an unconditional surrender. And I had people telling me, John, you just need to understand Trump's doing this because he wants to expose who the Iranians really are. And I'm like, you have 47 years of history with the Iranians. Where have you been? Nothing that's happened in the last 3 weeks is a surprise if you understand the Iranians and the way they do things.
Right. I agree.
And I will also say this. I may have said this in Vegas when I was there at your conference. I know I say it almost every week now, and on a lot of podcasts that people want to hear what I have to say. Whatever has happened with Iran over the last 47 years is going to happen with Turkey in the same manner, except it's going to be on a timeline that's compressed to maybe 3 years. Just watch. We are just starting into the intense Turkey part of this. We're not even there yet. So why would we give them not only F-35s, but other sophisticated jet engines? Our jet engines, I think, are unmatched in the world for durability and that type of thing.
Yes, and this puts Turkey as an increased threat against Israel as well.
And they say
That
it
makes no
all the
sense.
time. So Hakan Fidan, the foreign minister of Turkey, went out last week and said, and when I heard it, it was like I had to go get a calendar because I wanted to make sure it was 2026 and not 1936. Because he said Israel is a problem for all of humanity. It's the exact same thing that the Germans said back in the 1930s. And we knew where that ended up. And that's the plan, folks.
That is
That's the
where it
plan. So we
goes.
know
I
that
agree.
out of that, there's a remnant that will be saved. So I see a couple tracks. I see people becoming increasingly totally clueless, but I also see people sort of being restored to the things of God as well in Israel.
Yeah, I'm going to say something here too that I do think that perhaps the president is thinking, like other administrations have thought, like others in our um, intelligence department throughout the decades. Well, we need to bring a balance of power, and if we kind of do things in such a way where we're balancing one foe, so to speak, against another foe, then everyone's feeling like I don't have an advantage, so it's not worth launching that attack, that war, whatever it might be. Well, when you're dealing with maybe those that might be a little bit more rational, perhaps, but not when you're dealing with an Islamic mindset. The Islamic mindset does not care if they die, if their wives die, if their children die, if they use them as human shields. Okay, in fact, look what Iran was doing earlier this year with the human shields. Look what they were doing in Gaza with human shields. They don't care. They're all expendable for the greater purpose of who they call Allah and following the Quran and death to Israel and all of those things. It's all expendable. See, when we look at foreign policy from the American mindset, I think this is really where we get so much of it wrong. And you had mentioned earlier, Shia Islam, the Twelvers. I mean, they have their whole end times eschatology, but on their end, they believe that if they bring about war and terror and destruction and all of these things, that they are going to hasten, the revealing of the Mahdi. So this is core, not to all of Islam. This is core to Shia Islam itself. So okay, well let's get to the next question here. Vindog Radio statement. The whole thing.
Uh-oh. This will be a complex one.
The whole thing with Trump dealing with these stone cold annihilators like Turkey and other countries that come against Israel is going to be a hard judgment on America. Its coming family. I'm going to say really quick, I've been wondering about that myself, Vinny. I truly have. I've been wondering about that. What are your thoughts?
Say that again.
So basically, what Vinny is saying is some of the things that Trump is doing in kind of wheeling and dealing with Turkey, with Syria, with Qatar, all of those, that it's gonna, come back in a bad way on America, is what his thought is. That God is going to deal with this. That there's going to be a price to pay for this. That's what Vinny's saying.
I do think that that's a distinct possibility. I know I saw Bill Koenig being interviewed the other day, and Bill and I are pretty much, we've been talking about Turkey, both of us, for a very long time. And I do think we're certainly walking a very razor thin tightrope in the way we're dealing with this. I don't like the way that it's being done. I think, I posted this on my Facebook page a couple months ago. Let Israel finish the job. Kurt, you would not believe people that had been following me for years who are, I would say, actively interested in Bible prophecy, where they're accusing Israel of genocide and all other sorts of things. It was shocking to me to see it, the level of vitriol that came out in just that simple post, response to that post, let Israel finish the job. So I'll give you an example of this. So Israel, they have a drone threat from Hezbollah in Lebanon. Those drones are being flown by optical wires into Israel. Um, right now, Israel does not have a very effective countermeasure to this. Now, they're taking Iron Beam and they're putting them in different places, and that's fine, and that may work. But they're sort of in the developing countermeasures to this, is my understanding. And I think they will get there. But once they get there, what's going to happen? You're going to suddenly have drones that have AI, autonomous, non-network chips. So what Israel is doing is Israel is clearing out Hezbollah from southern Syria to get them far enough to the north that they can't fly those drones in by wire. Okay. So Israel goes in there, and in southern Lebanon, and I've been up there, just a few miles from Metula, they found a massive underground network, tunnels filled with missiles, explosives, drones, all kinds of things. So Israel rigged it and blew it up. And you can see the video of it. It's a pretty impressive explosion. All of the anti-Israel people immediately got on Twitter, X, whatever, and started saying, look at Israel destroying villages in southern Lebanon, never giving the context of what happened. This is evil personified. Yes, when it's done this way.
Yes, it is. And you know, when you had mentioned something earlier about in World War II, it was a full-on surrender. You know, the Japanese surrendered, the Germans surrendered. No one has surrendered here. And, you know, as we're talking about this, I'm thinking to myself, could you imagine, you know, my dad loved sports. He loved pro sports. He loved college sports. I don't think there was ever a sport that my dad didn't like. And when there were the big, you know, back in the day, you know, you'd have the heavyweight fights would be televised and those things, and he would just have it just blaring in the house, you know. And did you ever see or watch any of those fights? You know, maybe it's Floyd Mayweather or whoever, right? And they stop just short of a TKO, and they expect the other guy that they're fighting to just say, okay, you know, to cry uncle. Like, no, never. At least I never saw that. I never noticed that, right? You don't stop short of a TKO, a technical knock, or a knockout, let's say, of a knockout. You don't stop short of a knockout. So you're going until they're finished, right? And I mean, and so I don't understand this whole approach. With the United States, if the United States is going to enter into this situation with Iran, then we move forward until they cry uncle. With Lebanon and Israel keeps up the pressure until they surrender. You don't pull out short of this, or you're going to have a problem that's going to continue to grow and develop. And so this is the reason why we just find ourselves, it's like we start these things and we don't finish them. So I don't know. To me, it's really frustrating, to be honest with you. But okay, let's get to the next one. So we got nothing else to lose. Question: what is the best and biggest marker that we can look for just before the rapture happens?
Well, I'll let you go first on this one.
Hillary
Look, I
Hillary Clinton admits
that's right. She admits that Trump was right.
exactly. I you know I don't know what is the best and biggest marker that we can look for just before the rapture happens. There's not any one thing. I mean, we don't have any sign that is given to us in the Word that says that this thing or it's that thing. What I do believe that we see is when we see the um, all of these things together, right? I believe that Israel um, resettling, if you would, in 1948 and being rebirthed again as a nation, which we see throughout Scripture, said that that thing would happen, and it has. That has to happen because the Antichrist cannot enter into a covenant with Israel if Israel is not there geographically. There can't be a temple built on Temple Mount Jerusalem if Israel isn't there and has control over that area to some degree at least, and a whole host of other things. So Israel is the big, if you would, super sign. 1948, I believe, is the thing that really started setting things in motion where the Christian world should since 1948 start taking a look and saying, okay, now this is something here. I believe that there's other things, because we also see all of the scripture that speaks about Israel coming back into the land. Well, they couldn't do that until then, and that is continuing to happen right now. And I even believe that what's happening with Mamdani, the Democrat Socialists of America, all of these things is going to continue to open the eyes of the Jews in America that America isn't even going to be a safe place for many anymore, and the demonstrations from the colleges, etc., and they're going to have a mass exodus of America. I believe that that is a continuing of an unfolding of what we see as prophecy in the Old Testament as well. So all of these things, but there's not any one thing. Well, why are you saying all that? Well, I'm saying all of that because everything is coming together and preparing the technologies, if you would, for the mark of the beast, for the image of the beast, and a whole host of things. The continued push toward globalizing, global government, all of this, it's all coming together. And so that speaks of the fact that therefore the tribulation must be all the closer, which I believe then speaks of the nearness of the rapture by default. So that's how I get there, but we can't say that there's just one specific thing. If this one specific thing happens, then boom, there you go.
So let me just say too, there's a whole host of things that are coming together. I can't say that one or more is important. I do think Israel 48 was important. I think Israel 67
Yes.
was even maybe more important, the reunification of Jerusalem after 19 years of rule by the Jordanian Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And I was very specific in what I said that. We also saw in World War I the fall of the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
The British came in with the British Mandate. And we talk about, everybody talks about Israel. Israel's this recent invention. It didn't come about till 1948. But I'm sitting here looking at a page on a Google search that I did while you were talking. Syria never came into being until April of 1946, modern Syria.
Modern Syria.
So the interesting thing is that a lot of these countries are recent inventions. So, for example, we have after the Ottomans fell and the British Mandate
Mm-hmm.
and the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916, sort of divided up the Middle East into French, British, and Russian influence areas. Um, and the modern state of Turkey was born, and there was a Treaty of Lausanne, and then there are other treaties about how they control the entrances to the Black Sea, the Montreux Treaty or Montreux Convention of like 1938, I think it is, might be 1936. So all these things are very modern.
Yes.
In historical timeline, but the point is they're all converging at the same time.
That is
so now we have Assyria, but Syria doesn't have like a national language. It doesn't, they have different factions of Islam. They have Druze, they have Christians. They used to have Jews, more Jews than they do now. And Iraq is a relatively recent invention. That was initially in the British division up. Was Jordan was given to the Hashemite kingdom of the Sheriff of Mecca, the Sharif of Mecca. And another part of the Hashemite family got Iraq. And then that was overthrown. I think it was a Ba'ath Party overthrow to establish of Saddam Hussein. And there was a Ba'ath Party overthrow of Syria by the Assad family. So all of this stuff is, in broad, long historical view, is very recent and very intense. But back to Israel. So you have what you mentioned is too, when you look at Matthew chapter 24, it talks about the abomination of desolation. And when it happens, the people in Jerusalem are said, flee, get out of town, but pray that your flight is not on Shabbat. Now, my question has been, if it wasn't an Israeli Jewish state in existence when that happened, that prophecy makes no sense. But if you put a Jewish state in there where you can't get a bus on Shabbat or the light rail or that type of thing on Shabbat, then it makes much more sense that it's a Jewish-oriented city. And in 1967, like the old city, the Jewish quarter had been devastated by the Jordanians for 20 years. The Jews couldn't go to the Kotel, to the Western Wall. In Hebron, they had a thing at the tomb of Machpelah, the tomb of the patriarchs, the cave of Machpelah, that Abram had bought to bury his wife in which he and Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah are buried. There's no question about this historically. He bought that, and the Jews would go there to pray. It was there when Christ was here. That's interesting. And it pretty much, it exists. It's been added on, but the base of it is as it was when Herod built it 2,000 years ago. Now, some people think it was Solomon, but we'll save that argument for a later time. But the point is that the Jews, from the Muslim invasion, for hundreds of years, were restricted to what they call the seventh step. You can go there to the seventh step. It kind of looks like the Western Wall. And the wall was dark because that's where the Jews were allowed to go to pray, no further. That all changed in 1967. And now there are, I think, things underway to turn over the control of that structure to Jewish authorities. This is a huge deal. I was on the Temple Mount in October with my group. It was very interesting. It was during Sukkot. Was down in the Arab area. My cell phone battery died, so I had to go down to the Arab area on Shabbat to get a new cell phone battery. And then we were up on the Temple Mount a day or so later. And when the group of about 30 Jewish people came through singing and clapping and praying on the Temple Mount, between the Al-Aqsa, the Dome of the Rock, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And when they went by, there were less than 30 people on the whole Temple Mount. We're up there walking around. There's nobody around. But the fact of the matter is, the most of any group of people we saw that day were Jewish worshipers on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem
Yeah,
at Sukkot.
I just spoke about pretty much the same thing on Sunday. A couple of things. Things are changing dramatically. Like Israel is getting stronger, folks. Israel is getting stronger. Her control over things, over the Temple Mount. I know that we've had or they've had the whole status quo, as it's called there by the Jordanians for many decades. Well, this is what I say: that status quo is changing very quickly, and there's going to be a new status quo, and Israel is going to be in control of that. You know, this right here, May 24th, in Charisma, My Charisma magazine, a growing shift on Temple Mount, sending shockwaves through the prophetic world as expanded Jewish prayer permissions at the holy site accelerate the restoration of worship in Jerusalem and move biblical prophecy closer to fulfillment. I mean, this is crazy, you know. Psalm sung there at altar site. Again, another thing, just incredible. There's some more things that I plan on talking about regarding the Temple Mount this coming Sunday, by the way, in my update, and it's just absolutely fascinating what's happening. And so all of this is coming together. By the way, I've got to read this in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. And in fact, when you kind of begin in verse 20 and go all through from verse 20 to 27 in the 9th chapter of Daniel, but looking at verse 24, 70 weeks are determined for your people. Well, God is speaking to Daniel. Who is Daniel's people? It's not the Babylonians, guys. It's not the Gentiles, guys. It's not, from wherever. It's speaking about the Jewish people. 70 weeks are determined for your people. And it goes through this whole 70 weeks of years, and it ends up in 27, where it says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to the sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall one who makes desolate, all of that takes place in the Holy of Holies. Well, the Holy of Holies is only the Holy of Holies in the temple, which will be on Temple Mount in Jerusalem of Israel. So this is the context of all of this, and every attempt to get rid of the Jews only makes the Jews grow, so to speak, in their strength. The unfortunate factor of that is that they're not growing, by and large, they're not growing closer to the Lord. But I mean, they started really coming back in the 1800s, slowly making their way, all of that. And then we see the culmination of things, with Balfour and British Mandate, all of these things, 1948, 1967, all of these surprise attacks against her have turned out to be unfruitful in the long run. We look at October 7th, all of these things, and she's growing stronger and stronger and stronger. So yes, we are in the time. God is literally preparing Israel and preparing the world, and I believe right now he is preparing the church. He's preparing you and me for making our exit out of this place.
Yes.
So let's see if we can get through 2 more questions here. Let's see if we can blaze through these. Well, one of them is a statement. So this is from Amma Berean. I like that. I realize that some believe in a literal rebuilt Babylon. But I also realize that God chose Mystery Babylon when he could have said literal Babylon, but chose not to. Please comment. Well, there's a distinction.
This is one area where I sort of have my different baskets. I put stuff in my Babylon and Iraq basket. I put stuff in, maybe it's somewhere else in the Middle East. I don't think it's America. I know that's a very popular view. And people get really, really angry when you argue about it. So, if you want to think it's America, for now, it's okay. Eventually, it'll be clear where it is, but it is described as a mystery. And then the question becomes, is the mystery, well, how did this ever come back? Or is it someplace where we didn't expect it to be? And so there are people very adamant that it's got to be rebuilt Babylon in Iraq. So I'm just going to give you my view on that. I'm aware of that. I know about the Al Faw port. I know about the Iraq Development Road. I know that this week the Iraqi government, which seems to be in a state of shifting, did enter into agreements for the construction of pipelines for Iraqi oil into Syria to the Mediterranean. Now, the question is, how big are the pipelines going to be? How much oil can they transport? And when will they be ready to go? Right now, Iraq is transporting a lot of oil by truck from oil fields across Iraq. Iraq is probably number 3 or 4 in the world in terms of known oil reserves. I think Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran might be ahead of them. So it's a very significant country. Now, right now, the Strait of Hormuz is still effectively closed. So I think that, Iraq it's a very it's something we need to watch. So look, you can make a case Babylon will be rebuilt in Iraq, but let me tell you this: where the city of Babylon was, there's virtually nothing has been built. Okay, so the question is, how long will it take to build that to fit into your end time scenarios? Okay, when will it reach that threshold? I can tell you that a port 350 miles away is not the great commercial Babylon of the end times. I know that the Iraq Development Road is a big deal, and they're working on it and they're building it, but they're projecting end dates for its completion of 2050. So how does that square with our understanding of how quickly all of this is going to unfold? And so they're talking about pipelines, but they can only transport, I think, 800,000 barrels of oil a day by truck. And it has to go from Iraq to Syria, offloaded, trucks turn around and come back. And how many? I think I don't know, it's like 800 or 1,000 trucks to transport that much amount of oil. And so there's a logistics issue there. And there are pipelines being built, and there are railways being built across Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is building a pipeline. And right now, the Strait of Hormuz being closed is because Iraq, which has a lot of oil wealth, can't get the oil out because the Hormuz Strait is closed. But when wells start pumping, they have to be operated continuously. You just can't shut them down and open them back up. There's not like a tap that you turn on or off. That's not the way oil wells work. So if right now they're in trouble, they're in danger of losing their oil wells. And when those oil wells are closed down, they may never come back online. So that's an issue to factor in. And that's happening throughout the Middle East. That's happening in Iran right now because they can't get the oil out. And so they can't get the oil out. They have to shut the well down, and they can't start the well back up very easily. It's not that. So all of this stuff is converging at the same time. So I don't know. So that's a factor on this end time Babylon in Iraq. I think that could happen, but I think it's a ways away. That's my view.
All right, let's get to this last one right here. Asset Ministries. My study has led me to Rosh as being an adjective and not a location or region. This leads me to Turkey. Gog is identified as a leader from the land of Magog, ruling over Meshech and Tubal, being the head of Ezekiel 30a war. Could you and John please give us an interpretation or understanding of it?
So there are a lot of people.
Close it out on this one right here, folks.
Okay, a lot of people in our community think that Rosh is a region, Rosh, Russia. Okay, I think that every time it's used in scripture, it's a title, prince or chief prince. So I think it's chief prince of these areas, not uh, Gog is the chief prince of Meshach, Tubal, and Tagarma and those other regions. So that's why I think Turkey is the lead. But there, look, we'll see what happens. Okay, I'm just saying right now, I don't see Russia as the giant military power who could bring about an invasion 1,000 miles away into Israel, based on what I see, the facts on the ground. But again, these things can change quickly, and that could change. And I won't be surprised if it happens that way. And I won't be surprised, certainly won't be surprised if it doesn't.
And for myself, I see Russia because of her weakened state, not in her nuclear arsenal, of course, but her weakened state by way of her troops, right? I look at that as making it all the more necessary for her to be a part of this coalition with Turkey and with Iran and with Sudan and with Libya, that all of them are weak. I mean, how strong is Sudan? How strong is Libya, right? Now, Turkey is strong. Now, we do agree on that. Turkey is very strong, and they have one of the strongest militaries in the world. All right, but Russia is weakening and Iran is weakening, and so it would be necessary for them all to depend on one another and come together in order to accomplish what they think they're going to accomplish, which they're going to find out very quickly that they're not going to be able to.
Yeah,
So,
certainly the one right now that's leading in the rhetoric against Israel is Turkey. I think that's pretty clear. So we'll see.
right, but
And
I
Iran
do
too.
believe though
I take
that
it
the
back.
weekend
Iran also has been saying that for a long time.
I do believe, though, that that as Russia is in her troops in a weakened state, I believe actually adds to the desire to come together with others and go the hook in the jaw, so to speak, there to the land of Israel. So, all right, folks. Well, that's a wrap. it's been it's been great today, and having on John and just kind of trying to get some perspective, a little bit debate on some of these things as well. I know the Babylon question is always a real big one there. And when you talk about Babylon, I believe that we see geographical Babylon. We also see the religious aspect of Babylon as well. When we're looking there in Revelation, there's the religious aspect of it. There's the geographical aspect of it there as well. I will also say that in the Word, when we look in the New Testament, when we read of mysteries and things like that, things that are mysteries or mysterious, or the word there I think in the Greek is mysterion, for those who don't know the Lord, God reveals His mysteries to His people. He reveals His mysteries to His church, and as we are called to be those Bereans and just search deeper and deeper into His Word, I believe that He continues to reveal these things to each and every one of us. So, well, John, thank you so much for being on today and just giving your perspective on some of these things that you're seeing here. This we know, that we're getting closer and closer. We certainly are closer than we were an hour and 40 minutes ago to the things that the prophet spoke about. And listen, folks, just like we spoke last night from our study there in completing Hebrews chapter 4, that find your rest in the Lord. Enter into that rest that we can only have in this life through Jesus Christ, our Savior and Lord. Would you like to close out in one last thing here today?
No, I think people need to be aware of what's going on, pay attention. Um, and look, we're sort of in this. I don't know if I'd call it a paradox. I guess it is a paradox because we know what's going to happen. Because we can see all these things happening in the Middle East that line up with Bible prophecy. But then on the other hand, should we just sit back and not comment on it and let it happen? I don't think that's our role. So we can see that it's happening and it may be prophetic, but it doesn't mean we have to support it. It doesn't mean we have to support the Iranian government because we think it's mentioned as Persia in the end. So it's kind of a difficult road to navigate, but certainly things are changing very rapidly, and we didn't talk about it today. We need to talk about Islam at some point in more detail because that's a very difficult issue that the United States and other Western countries have to deal with, and not in the distant future. They need to deal with it right now.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, my friend. All right. Well, thank you
Thank
for
you,
being
Kurt.
on today, John. And everyone, you can connect with John. If you haven't connected with John, I encourage you to go into the description section of today's video, and you'll find how you can connect with him and everything that he is doing there. So, all right. Well, God bless you guys, and we look forward to seeing you next time, whether we're on this program or whether we meet one another in the air. God bless you all.